I'm the Dark Knight cosplay, and today I'm going to be showing you a technique on how to make leatherette style armor plating when attaching it to either foam. And what you would initially end up with is something like this. Now this was used with a thinner based either foam and a very thin and stretchy leatherette, which I'm going to show you the technique on how to do. But instead of using it with black leatherette, I'm going to be showing it with a different kind of texture. Now this isn't quite so thin and stretchy, so it's going to make it a little bit more of a challenge. So I'm going to show you, I've already gotten started with this and I've got a whole load more done, but I'm going to show you the technique on how this is done to begin with so that you can get an idea of how to do it yourself. Now I've already gotten started with this by gluing it to the base to begin with, and probably should have shown to start with. I've also sanded down the edges to give it a little bit more of a curved bit when it comes to bending it around that side, so it's not quite so rectangular in the look. But what you want to do from this point onwards is, because of the toughness of the material, you want to be able to make it to curve around all the edges to give it a nice, more realistic look at the end of it. So from this point onwards, you've got all of these corners and all of the edges around here. You want to make a cut. Once you've got a little bit more of a space, rounded edges, like this as such, you cut at every single point, whether it's either sticking out or sticking in to the piece of armour that you're going to be wrapping it around. So, I'm not just cutting at random points, I'm cutting at every outside edge so that it goes around like that, or at every point where it curves inwards so that when it bends round it can spread out more easily across the foam. I'm going to do this around all the edges now. Normally if I'm using the black leatherette, there can be a little bit of give with it sometimes, allowing it to just curve more naturally, as is around the edge here. It gives a nice natural curve when you're doing it around more smoother edges. Whereas with this one in particular, I bought this from a specialist fabric shop, and the detailing, if you can see there, is pretty cool. Almost gives it a Kevlar kind of look, which is what I'm going for. However, with the detail, it is a lot more stubborn, so I've got to try and accommodate for that. So now that I've made all the appropriate cuts that I need to around the edges, we can start to glue it. Now, what I've been using up until recently is this. It's Bostik all-purpose glue. Normally get it for £1 or $1.99 depending on how generous the store is, and it has been pretty good. It's a little bit of a messy material, but it does tend to hold stuff together quite well. It takes a little bit of time though, about a good couple of minutes, maybe 5 minutes of holding it together before you can feel safe to let it go. Whereas now, I've moved on to Gorilla Glue. Now this stuff is immense. You don't want to get it on your fingers for the obvious reasons, but it holds stuff together within 10 seconds and it is very good to apply. I am specifically using the gel, as you noticed, so that way the glue does not run when you apply it. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pick a base to start on. I think I'm going to go with this particular spot. So, take the glue, get it loosened up a bit so that it reaches the nozzle easier. I'm going to apply a few strategic areas with the glue. One at the base. Curve it around nice and tight and hold it for 10 to 20 seconds. And the great thing about this glue is that if you're efficient with it and you don't get yourself caught up in too many places, you can move swiftly on from one spot to another without wasting too much time. There we go. Now, what you'll also find is as you're bending it around, you're going to have a lot of excess going over the edge that you don't need to. So as you're going along, you want to adjust where you want to trim it off to make less effort on gluing around the back. So in this case here, we'll go with about that much. Try it there. Maybe a little bit more. there. And now as it starts to curve around, we'll be able to match the edges up a lot more tidier. And not too many points, doesn't have to be spread all over the place because this is incredibly powerful glue that only takes a couple of seconds to get a grip. So you start to go along all these places, and as you round up all the edges, you should eventually end up with something very much like this. This one here needs a little bit more of a trim around the edges because it's got a little bit pointy there, so good pair of scissors, round them off. Little points in there, they shouldn't matter too much. Okay. So then you are now left with something that looks very much like a Kevlar armour plating material. In this case, it is one of the abs, the abdominal areas that I'll be attaching to this particular piece. And the result of which should give you a very armour plated looking chest plate. See the detail on it? Gives it much like a carbon fibre Kevlar look. It's not all glued together yet, and I've still got to finish off the chest plating with the red circle behind the symbol to give it the flashpoint look.